You're live.
Okay. Shabbat Tov to everyone. Today on our menu we're going to finish chapter 243 after I think 2 weeks worth of introduction. The introduction is probably 10 times the size of the actual chapter. And as soon as we're done this chapter, we are going to begin Hilchos Purim, and pretty much we're not going to continue Hilchos Shabbos until after Passover, until after Pesach. Because we're going to be doing this week and next week Hilchos Purim, and after Purim we will be doing 3/4 weeks, whatever we're able to do of Hilchos Pesach. Regarding the Tuesday night share, as of now everything remains as scheduled. If we need to, we will supplement that with also shirim on Hilchos Pesach, Hilchos Purim. So again, we're in chapter 243 in the Shulchan Aruch. We are about to read inside. We have not yet read this inside. Again, this chapter is the first chapter of a group of chapters discussing having a Gentile do work for you over Shabbos. There's many different aspects of this subject spread out throughout the chapters. And we will now read the first subject discussed, which is in chapter 243, which is regarding having a Gentile work your business in a way that does not transgress any halachic prohibition, but nonetheless may be maras ayin and therefore be forbidden. So let's see. So back in the day, nobody really had a private bath. There was a public bathhouse that the whole community would go to whenever they wanted to take a bath and to take a shower. There were men days, there were women days. In Sefer Zechainus we have a very interesting description of how this worked back in the 1500s. It's very interesting historically. I think it's a great historical perspective of how these things work. But there were different days for men and women. Women would do Thursday, men would do Friday. It was split up. And so the question was asked. Usually, there was an owner of the merchatz of the bathhouse. It wasn't owned by the community. There was a business entrepreneur who built it and would receive the money, the payments for, just like today, a mikveh. Like people pay for the mikveh. So the question is, can you rent out this merchatz to a Gentile and have him run it over Shabbos and, of course, receive payment? Let's use a practical example today of let's say the JCC. The JCC is built by Jews, owned by Jews. Can they rent it, meaning rent the entire facility to Gentiles on Shabbos? That's a lot of lost revenue on Shabbos because Jews can't use it, and they will have it used by Goyim and make a lot of money every Shabbos. So, he says the Mechaber, it is forbidden for a person to rent his bathhouse to a Gentile, being that everyone knows that the JCC is Jewish. Everyone knows the bathhouse of Dover Missel, the bathhouse of Lubavitch is Jewish. So it doesn't help that you found a nice Gentile who's willing to do business with you and pay you, $10,000 to rent out the JCC for every Shabbos, per Shabbos, because everyone knows the Jewish Community Center is the JCC. So even though there's no issur here of any malach, because he's not working for you, he's working for himself. You're not telling him to go ahead and do any malacha on Shabbos. It's not like a case where I'm asking him to cook something for me. I'm not asking him to do any malacha. The place belongs to him. He's making an acquisition. He's acquiring it in essence as a rental agreement for the Shabbos day. And as the Alter points out, let's assume that there's also no issur here of schar Shabbos, of making money off of Shabbos, which said you're really not allowed to. You're not allowed to make money off of Shabbos, because in this case you're not making off of Shabbos. Let's say because you're renting it to him for a little bit before Shabbos and a little bit after Shabbos, so it's all one. It's like 30 hours worth of rental, including the 24 hours of Shabbos. So we've circumvented all the possible prohibitions. Nonetheless, it is still forbidden because Shem Yisrael Nikra Lau. As the name of a Jew is upon it, and people are going to see, hey, this Jewish owner is running the bathhouse on Shabbos, and that's marasai. They're going to think that that the Jew told the guy to stand guard and collect money from the Gentiles, and we see that he's having a Gentile work for him on Shabbos. He's having a Gentile that he's making business on Shabbos. So that's the marasai, and that's why it's forbidden. Ovid, ונמצא ליהודי עשה מלאך בשחוץ ישראל והשדה מותר שכן דרך לקבל שדה באריסוס. So it says in the Chabad, this prohibition is only in a case where it is uncommon for this type of business to be rented out, to be what we can call sublet to another party, a Gentile in this case. But if that is the case, if it's very common for a person to sublet to the JCC for, a year to a Gentile company, and people know all the time this is common of every JCC in the world, it's common in every bathhouse in the world, then if this were to be common, then nobody would have the Marasign thing, it's a Jew paying a guy to run it for him on Shabbos, and he's making the Shabbos money. No, it's sublet. For example, anyone who knows a little bit about business knows that McDonald's franchise is not a franchise in which they own every store on earth. It is a store that is basically sublet by a partner company, and that money that they make, they pay a certain amount per month or per year, whatever it is, a fixed amount, or maybe a percentage amount, to McDonald's to carry the name and carry everything. But it's their store. It's if it goes bankrupt, they go bankrupt, not McDonald's going bankrupt, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the idea of being sublet to another party, and I think most brand name businesses, I think a lot of brand name businesses work that way. There are some that do, like Kmart own all their buildings, and as we know, they're no longer around, probably because of that. they went bankrupt. In any event, so in a case where it is known that it is common to sublet to others, then it is not a problem Marasign, so long as you avoid all the other prohibitions. You're not taking money just for Shabbos, it's being taken as global for the global rent, etc. The case example of the subletting in the times of the Talmud was regarding a field. Back in the day, they would rent out an orchard they would sublet an orchard to other people, and the renters would basically, how would they pay? They would pay a certain percentage of the product that they would yield from the field to the owner. And that was an exchange, so they basically had to cultivate the field, they worked the field, they did all the work, and the owner got a certain percentage of the product as a result of that. So in that case, everyone knows it's common to sublet your field, your orchard, to Gentiles. So no one's thinking, it's the Jewish-owned field, and he has hired Goyim working for him on Shabbos and picking fruits and selling fruits and making money. No one's going to have that Marasign because it's common for people to sublet. Even though in this case clearly the Jew receives benefit from the guy working it on Shabbos, as the more he works the field, the more money it brings in, and meaning the more product the owner will receive. But nonetheless, since the guy is doing this on his own, he's doing it for his own benefit, and the Jew didn't tell him to work on Shabbos. Therefore, and he has no right to, even if he did. Therefore, there is no isser involved. Sif Beis, afilu merchat zeitaner in haskiram l'shana achashana mispasam adavay dekach shen dakal iskapoilim laskirim chenim min agovan sheisa makam laskirim elitum ba'arisus mutter laskirim lein Yehuda elitum loy ba'arisus. In the event that it is common in this city, in this particular city, despite the normal universal practice, to rent out the bathhouse or also the oven. It used to be they would have communal ovens. People didn't have ovens at home, not everyone owned. So they'd have a communal oven that was owned by an individual, and you had to pay to use that oven. So can I rent it out to a guy? Same issue. Most people think that if a guy would be working on Shabbos for a guy, most people think, the Jewish owner has hired help, and look at him transgressing Shabbos, making money. But if it's common to rent out, to sublet the tanner or sublet the bathhouse, and not just to have a hired worker, then people will not think that way, and it would be mutter. And that's how we rule practically. So if a person went ahead and didn't listen, and he went ahead and he subletted his bathhouse, and there is Marasign involved, it's a machlekes and poskim if he can keep the profit, and bottom line we rule is that he may not, and it is forbidden to benefit from that money. Let's just give a quick summary, and we'll do a few quick practical examples that come out of this chapter, and then we'll move on straight to Purim. So we explain as follows, that there is a prohibition of Marasayan for a person to sublet his business to a Gentile and have the Gentile run it on Shabbos, because people will think, oh, it's not really subletted, this is a hired worker. If, for example, if I owned a grocery store, and every Shabbos you see it open with a guy standing there selling my fruits, you would think, okay, he didn't sell his store to this guy, he didn't rent this store to this guy, this is his Gaisha worker that's now making money for him on Shabbos, and this is terrible. This is forbidden. So because of that, it would be completely usher in such a case, because of Maris Ayin, even if in truth I did rent it to him. It's his, it's not mine. I'm not telling him to work for me, it's his. He can close the store. I'm making my money regardless what he does. Yeah, he has to pay me the rent for the subletting. So it would still be usher. However, in a case where this is public knowledge that people do this all the time, there would not be a and in the first case, for when Hanan did so, actually the money would be forbidden, even though there isn't actually any Schar Shabbos here or Mir L'Nacher here, but due to the Marasayan, we forbid it. Let's give some practical examples. A person who owns a clothing factory, okay, meaning he owns the facilities to produce clothing. Now, it is commonly subletted to other companies. A company says, I want to, I see you have a great factory in Bangladesh, which a lot of the clothing is made there, and I would like to sublet it from you. This is a real case that I know of that happened, where a Jewish clothing store owner, a clothing manufacturer owner, he owned the actual equipment and the actual housing, and he would sublet it to others. And the answer is that is permitted to be done on Shabbos, as first of all, no one in Bangladesh knows it's Jewishly owned, and second of all, not only that, but it is common to rent out the factory to others to do their work there. Similar with a hotel. If I'm a hotel owner, let's say it's a Jewish hotel, it is very common for someone to sublet the hotel for vacation packages, for people. It happens, the Eden Rock all the time, every Pesach is subletted by Jewish tour groups and so on and so forth. So if that was the opposite case, where it's really owned by a Jew, which Fontainebleau was owned by a Jew until recently, it would be permitted for them to sublet it, and even though they're making money, of course, a lot of money off that Shabbos day, because everyone knows it is common to sublet the hotel and is not something that you are going ahead and actually making your own money from. There is also no chashash of them doing malacha with your objects, because I don't have an isser. There is no prohibition for my objects to be doing things on Shabbos. Even though my equipment that I'm renting to him is doing malacha, there is no prohibition for my equipment to do malacha, so that is not a problem. Likewise, it is also due to this permitted to rent an apartment to someone who's mechalel Shabbos. I don't have to side with the claim, well, you're giving him, you are facilitating his ability to use the electricity, to remove onions from salad and do butter and do all these things inside your apartment. You're giving him the space. The answer is no. Yes, I am giving him the physical space, but that does not fall under the isser of Maris Ayin, because I'm not giving him the actual malacha to do. I'm just giving him the space area to do it in, and we don't find a precedent to decree Maris Ayin due to simply renting space to someone. And the same would apply with a warehouse. If there's Jewish-owned warehouses that we rent to Goyim, and Goyim do whatever they want in it, there's no prohibition. Once again, everyone knows that I don't own the business inside the warehouse, I just own the physical structure. So he's not my shliach in any which way to do his malacha. On the other hand, we do find that in all these cases, even a case where there's no Marasayan, it's allowed, if there's a chance that Jews will be mechalel Shabbos and Jews will end up purchasing, then it practically should not be done. For example, in New York City, okay, so let's say I own a chain store, a clothing chain store, okay, and I own 50 stores in the New York area, and I want to sublet it to a bunch of Goyim to run on Shabbos. So, Minadin, it's mutter, because it's common to sublet the chain stores. So everyone knows it's owned by, the name is owned by the Jew, but this store is owned by a guy. He pays me a certain fixed amount yearly or monthly, whatever the agreement is. On the other hand, we know that New York is 10% Jewish. And chances are they're going to be Jewish customers. You better believe there will. There's many non-religious customers who will go in and buy on Shabbos. And this is a problem of lifnei iver l'sitin michshol. Now, halachically, we can say, well, there's other clothing stores available, owned by Goyim. I'm not the one doing it. There's definitely a valid halachic argument to say it's still mutter in such a case. and some do rule this way, but nonetheless, the best thing would be to try to avoid the situation. It's obviously a very big challenge to tell the guy you have to close the store on Shabbos, and you would lose the revenue of that day. Okay, this covers chapter 243. This is the end of the chapter. We'll, as I said, continue from 244, starting after Pesach. So we have a nice little Shabbos vacation. Vacation from Shabbos, because we're going to go straight to the Yomim Tovim.
You also plan to Sphira during that period. You'll also do.
Yeah, Sphira is a short class. It's not a lot of material. Okay, so first for all of our newcomers, we have our beautiful Purim book. We also have a Pesach book that has a lot of great material in it. So for our also online audience, that is available today and tomorrow. Get it before Purim. That's a good question. I think it's 60 shekel. I have to ask my wife. Okay, so before I want to start for today's class, I want to cover Mishlach Manis, Matanas Levyanim, and Purim Seudah. And next class, I want to do Megillah reading. And also Zachar. I want to do this class because that's coming up. Before, though, I want to begin with two interesting midrashim. There's a lot of midrashim here that I allocated from different sources, some very rare sources. I originally wrote this. And two of the ones that, I like a lot of them, but two of the ones that I think stand out the most for me at least are the following two, which I'll read to you. The first one is, I really like this one. This medrash really goes well while you're eating hamantashen. And it's as follows. This was the written letter of the decree that was sent out to all the provinces, right? The pasuk in the Megillah Esther, the pasuk says in chapter 3, he says the following. He discussed the plot with the king, who acquiesced to his request, and the signed decree was sent forth to the governors of all nations on the 13th of Nisan. Yud Gimel Nisan, right, the Yartzeit of Tzemach Tzedek. So Haman sent the decree to annihilate and destroy the entire Jewish people to all the governors of all the lands. We know that Achashverosh, right, he had 127 lands that he was king of, basically, which had governors in each of these lands. And he was telling them, I am decreeing upon all of you to destroy all the Jewish people in all your lands on this day. Meaning almost a year later, Yud Daled Adar, almost a year later. So I've always wondered what was written in that letter. What did he write? What did Haman write to everyone, to all the governors? What was written? So we don't have an original copy of the Persian written letter, that, as far as I know, but we do have the Medrash who records the nusach of the letter, and it's actually in two different Midrashim, with very slight nuances between the two, and the two Midrashim did not see each other. One of them is Yaakov Shemaini, the other is Medrash Rabbi. They did not see each other, so this is another verification of the authenticity of this letter, where we have two different, separate, independent sources writing the same thing. So the Medrash says the following, that this was written in the letter. This is a translation. So Esther Rabbah has the following introduction. It says, peace unto all of you. This also goes really well with thinking like the United Nations putting out an article against Israel. Peace unto all of you. You all know that there is a certain man amongst us from the seat of kingship, the descendant of Amalek, and he is one of the Gedolei Hadar. You don't have to be a tzaddik to be a Gadol Hadar. That's what he writes here. His name is Haman. He has sat with us and told us about this nation. A lowly nation sits in our midst. They appear like madmen who strive for evil to befall us. They are ungrateful. Paro hosted them in his land and fed them during times of famine, and they repaid him with evil by cunningly telling him they need to leave for 3 days for a sacrificial holiday for their God. And they borrowed all the gold and silver and never returned. They had a prophet called Moshe who whispered to his staff and caused the sea to split. Paro and the Egyptians went through to only be drowned.
My ancestor Amalek then came to battle them, and Moshe sent his cruel student Yeshua to attack them. Moshe whispered some words, and many Amalekim fell. They did the same to each nation in Canaan. Then came this King David, who fought against all the kingdoms, and a son who built this house in which they would enter and perform these strange rituals. This ended when Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed them and exiled them to these countries. Nevertheless, they still did not change their putrid ways, which scoff at us and our deities. We are an abomination in their eyes, and they don't marry into us. There are many more matters which cannot even be written in this letter. So we have made a lottery to destroy them on the 13th of Adar. And when you receive this letter, 13th of Adar, right? Not 14th. 14th was the day of rest. 13th of Adar, when you receive this letter, please destroy them and annihilate them, men, women, and children, and do not leave anyone for refuge. Signed, Haman. So this was his original letter that he sent out. Well, he was the viceroy. So this was so we see that how anti-Semitism was very cunning, even originally. They would always try to embellish it with falsehoods and false claims, and try to stir anti-Semitism. So that's one interesting thing. Another interesting medrash, it's one of the Mefarshim, the Ian Yaakov. So while the standard approach and understanding is that Vashti, after she scoffed and was very brazen to the king, had her head separated from her shoulders and in essence died, the Ian Yaakov has a very novel approach explaining that in truth Vashti did not die. Vashti was actually kept alive, and he explains the following. He says that Vashti was not executed, but she was merely demoted from her position as queen. And this is implied from the fact that the Pasuk does not mention anything of her execution. It doesn't say that she was killed. It doesn't say. So what happened to her? This is what the Ian Yaakov writes. Vashti was eventually taken by Haman as a maid to serve him, without the knowledge of Achashverosh. This is why Achashverosh became, and now he explains something amazing, which answers a very big question towards the end of the story. By the second feast, so right, it says that that Achashverosh asked Esther, Mihu zeh ve'ezehu? Who is this man that made such a decree against your nation? He's talking to Esther. What do you mean, you didn't know? You were in the Kohutz with him. We read the beginning of the Megillah. Achashverosh knew very well who was against the Jewish people. He knew very well who made the decree. And in fact, Esther wanted to point to him, if not for the Malach coming and moving her fingers, to point at Haman. So what is Achashverosh playing dumb, as if, who is this man? And he gets all angry, as if Esther is revealing to him, America. So what the Ein Yaakov explains is like this, is that there's a little conversation here that didn't make it into the actual Megillah. Achashverosh, she told Achashverosh, by the way, I'm Jewish and there's people that want to kill my people. He says, yeah, I know, that's me and Haman. We're doing it together. Then she says to him, well, I want to tell you something about this Haman. This Haman, you remember Vashti? Remember what happened to her? Well, she was never killed. Haman took her as a maid. So he asked, who's the one that took Vashti as a maid? And then she pointed at Haman. And with that, when his trick became discovered, Achashverosh had him killed.
So that's why he had him killed?
That's the Ein Yaakov's approach.
Instead of the reason that we always think he had him killed?
Yeah, because it was against the Jewish people. It doesn't. The question is that what is Achashverosh getting all upset about? He gave the permission. This was his decree. This wasn't Haman working behind his back. There was a whole discussion. It was done together.
But he changed his mind when he realized his loved one.
So you don't kill the person who you decide, so kill yourself as well. You're just as guilty as Haman is. What are you getting angry at Haman? So this is the Ein Yaakov's approach.
So he killed him because even though he was having killed himself, he was killed him because he didn't like the fact that he took his wife for a maid.
He betrayed him.
But he had according to this version, did Achashverosh deemed to kill Vashti, have her killed?
After? Later on, I have no idea.
Only after the Haman, when
Mhm.
the Haman
But
took her.
he really killed him because he fell on his wife. I mean, he attacked Esther.
Well, he was already angry to begin with.
Yeah.
So what made him angry to begin with? He didn't take my anger management course that I gave last week on Wednesday night. And I'm glad he didn't.
Amazing.
Okay, let us now begin. Let us now begin the mitzvahs of Mishloach Manos, Talis of Yenim, and Purim Suda. So let's begin. The first one, Mishloach Manos. So we know that one of the four main mitzvahs of Purim is Mishloach Manos Ish L'Re'ehu, sending presents man to his friend. So before we go into all the details involved in this mitzvah, I wanted to just give a little overview of what is the reason that the Chachamim set this mitzvah in action, and meaning what is it here to accomplish? And based on that, we will see a number of ramifications that there will be between the different approaches. So there are two known approaches as to why the Chachamim, the sages, instituted the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. It's interesting because the Gemara Megillah does not go into this. This is later lumdus, as they say, lumdus of the later authorities. We have a lot of mitzvahs that are written, and it doesn't explain to us the reason behind the mitzvah. And if we don't have a reason, we can't answer various questions asked on the mitzvah, because we don't know what to compare it to. We don't know if this answer fulfills the reason. So we have two main opinions that voice what in their approach, what in their view, is the reason behind the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. One is the opinion of the Manais Levi, and the second is the opinion of the Trumas Hadeshin. Who was the Manais Levi? The Manais Levi, this literally means the presence of Levi, so was written by Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz, one of ours, on Tzfas. In the 1500s, the acclaimed author of Lichadeidi. So he wrote the Pirush Manais Levi, so he wrote it for his father-in-law as a gift. And so there's a lot of very novel ideas that he writes here in his commentary. And one of the things he writes is as follows, in the end. This is in the end of the Sefer. He explains that the reason the Chachamim established the mitzvah Mishloach Manos is in order to increase in love and friendship amongst other Jews. The purpose of it is for spread Avos Yisrael. That is the purpose of this mitzvah. The Rabbi explains in the Sikha that the reason for this is because one of Haman's attacks on the Jewish people, which he described to Achashverosh, as is written in the Megillah, Am Mefuru Mefuzar, that the Jewish people are a scattered nation. And he was trying to say that they're easy to be killed, they're not together, not united, but spiritually this was an attack on the Jewish people, that they have a lot of infighting. We all know when the Jewish people are ba'achdus, are unified together, they are protected. They are protected by Hashem, from their enemies. But chas v'shalom, when there's infighting and machlekes, there's no greater danger than the inner enemy. And therefore, in order to battle this issue that was brought up by Haman in the times of Purim, we, the Chachamim, instituted to specifically distribute Mishloach Manos for the sake of increasing love and friendship amongst other Yidden. Based on this reason, it's understood why the mitzvah applies whether you give it to a pauper or whether you give it to an usher, to a wealthy person, which is the halacha. That your yaitse, no matter who you give it to, there is no criteria of receivers. Anybody can receive Mishloach Manos as long as he's Jewish and he's celebrating Purim the same day you are. Because you are increasing love and friendship with that Jew. A second reason that's recorded is recorded in the Trumas Hadeshin, who was one of the Ashkenazi Rishonim, Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin. In the Shulchan Aruch, he's cited all the time by the Ramah in the words Mahari. You see in the Shulchan Aruch of the Ramah, in the brackets when he writes his sources, he would always write, instead of Trumas Hadeshin, Mahari. That's referring to Mereinu Harav Yisrael Isserlin. So he was one of the greatest Rishonim of Ashkenaz, that so many halachas that we have today are based on him, not just for Ashkenazim, even for Sephardim. But nonetheless, he was the second, he brings the second approach to understanding this mitzvah, and he writes differently than Shlomo Alkabetz. He writes that it has nothing to do with friendship and increasing unity. It's a nice thing, I'm not saying it's not, but that's not the reason and cause of the decree of Mishloach Manos. Rather, the reason the sages instituted this mitzvah is very simple. It's a subcategory of the mitzvah of Sudas Purim. In order so every Jew can have a guaranteed beautiful Sudas Purim, we give each other foods. We give each other different foods so we can add it to the Purim meal.
So we have to eat all our shalom that we receive as part of our Purim meal?
Based on this, there is an Indian, absolutely, to have it for your meal, some of it at least, it's the increase in the Purim meal in the menu. So there definitely is a concept, a reason, according to the Trumas Hadeshin, to have it for one's Purim meal. So let's see what are some practical ramifications between the two approaches. So one is the following. What happens if I send someone the Mishloach Manos, and he refuses to receive it? The person refuses to receive the Mishloach Manos. Do I fulfill my obligation? Let's say the person is an Avel. You're not supposed to send to an Avel. So the person, even though the halach is once you're sent, you can accept, the mitzvah is on the others, not on you. There's no issue for you to accept. The issue is for them to give. But he didn't know this detail, and this Avel said, no, I can't take him an Avel. So does this giver fulfill his obligation? And what happens, as I saw I got last year, there were only 2 Jews in this city, and one is an Avel. In this town that they were in, there were only 2 people. One is an Avel, otherwise they didn't know any other Jew. There's the only Jew who knew. So can he give him? He said he gave him, but he wouldn't accept it. So this is one of the ramifications. If we say the purpose is to increase friendship, as they say, it's the thought that counts. So I gave him the thought. The guy knows, the person knows that I'm thinking of him, and I'm trying to invest in him, and this helps for the love and friendship.
So he's Yotzi.
He's Yaitse, according to the Menei Levi. However, according to Trumas Hadeshin, did you enhance his Purim meal? No, you did not. So he says you're not Yaitse.
Okay, speaking of festive meals, I gotta go.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Mazel tov to Yehuda Sugar. He's marrying off his first child, a daughter. It should be a very joyous celebration, which we will, Mirz Hashem, join. Number 2. The receiver isn't home. This happens often. Everyone's doing their Mishloach Manos, so not always do you get them. So you leave the Mishloach Manos at the door, and when the person comes home, he sees, oh, there's a name. You left it from so-and-so, so they know that they received it from this and this family. So the receiver knows who he got it from, the giver knows who he gave it to, but if he doesn't come home until after the Purim Seudah, unless he's eating the Seudah elsewhere, does that person who gave fill his obligation? Once again, the machlek is between the Menei Levi and Trumas Hadeshin. In such a situation, even according to Menei Levi, you should send a text or call the person, listen, I left you Mishloach Manos by your door, and then the friendship has been accomplished. But if he doesn't know anything until he comes back after the Purim Seudah and Purim is over, and if he's drunk, then he still doesn't know anything till the next morning or sometime next week, then in that case, by the time the friendship is created, it's not Purim anymore. So you wouldn't fulfill the obligation to anybody. The third ramification is, do we say Matan Baseiser? Should I give Mishloach Manos discreetly? So, if you follow the opinion through Trumas Hadeshin, so long as this person got added food for his meal, I fulfilled the mitzvah. But if you say, like Shlomo Alkabetz, that the whole purpose of the mitzvah is to increase friendship, how do you increase friendship with someone you don't know? So, if I don't know who gave it to me, so am I going to increase friendship with every single Jew in the city due to doubt? I'm not sure. So according to the Menei Levi, this would be a problem. A fifth ramification is regarding a married woman. Must a married woman give Mishloach Manos And on this, the answer is that a married woman, according to the first approach, that the purpose is to increase love and friendship, does have to give mishloach manis, as everyone has a personal obligation to increase friendship. However, according to the opinion of the Trumas Hadeshin, that the purpose is so every Jew has food to eat for the Purim meal, since she's dependent on her husband and she receives food in her husband's meal, so she does not have an obligation to give or receive. Practically, regarding a married woman, we rule that she should give her own independent mishloach manis outside of her husband, meaning that in addition to whatever the husband gives to other people, likewise, the wife is to get permission from her husband to give to people that she wants to give to. The wife should give to people that she wants to give to, and that is to be accomplished as written in the Poskim, that the husband is to be makna to her, is to acquire to her whatever mishloach manas she wants to give, so it's hers and not the husband's, and she therefore fulfills the mitzvah with her own objects, with her own items, as usually whatever the wife owns is also owned by the husband. So this can only practically be accomplished is if she gives it from her own personal things, which is basically he acquires it to her. Okay, who is obligated to send mishloach manas? So as we said, the obligation is on both men and women. They are obligated in the midst of sending mishloach manas, and as is emphasized in the Poskim and the Ramah, men are to send to men and women are to send to women, but not a change, not a switch. The reason for this is not due to tznius, but rather because of a chashash of kedushin. As what if a person sends to a single woman or a widow, and this can lead to a question of kedushin of betrothal. And I know this sounds very strange because so should I never ever give anything to a single girl because it sounds like it's kedushin. What if she dropped something on the floor and I'm doing a Shabbos Aveda? I shouldn't give it to her? So it sounds a little strange. But nonetheless, here, everyone understands this is an additional gift that's not necessary. It's not part of any mitzvah or Shabbos Aveda or anything like that. And because of, especially back in the day, it was common for people to give different gifts to their to the bride before the wedding, and this was called savlainis, and this could be viewed that way. Therefore, practically, the Chachamim said that it should not be done. So practically, we do not give from men to women and women to men, but rather each to their own gender. As we said before regarding the wife, based on the Magen Avram and the Manois Levi, she is to give her own mishloach manas, and this can be accomplished by either she distributing it herself from mishloach manas that the husband gave her as hers, or by the husband giving mishloach manas and having in mind that part of this mishloach manas is owned by her, and therefore he's sending it also on her behalf. So if a couple wants to send one mishloach manas, so they should put a few things inside. Some of it is owned by the husband, some by the wife, and they are both fulfilling it with the same person who is receiving it. Other family members, this is not like Hanukkah where we say that other family members don't have to light candles. This is an individual mitzvah for every Jew above bar and bas mitzvah. And therefore, every family member must send their own personal mishloach manas, and they cannot rely on their parents, even if they are being supported by them and live in their home. Nonetheless, they have to, either they use their own money or the parents give them money, whatever the case is, they have a mitzvah, midrabanan, just like everyone else, to send mishloach manas. Regarding children, so children who are above the age of chinuch are to be educated to give mishloach manas, and as the Rebbe pointed out in a talk, in a case of doubt, be stringent. So if you're in doubt whether the child has reached the age of chinuch, just be stringent. It's not such a big deal that he should give mishloach manas to someone. An avel is obligated in mishloach manas. While we say that you shouldn't send it to an avel, that doesn't mean that he shouldn't send to others. He is chayiv to send mishloach manas like every other Jew. And the only restriction that we apply to an avel is that we say he shouldn't send foods of festivities like sweets and superfluous delicacies, but rather he should send meal staples like bread, meat, and other foods of the kind, and not simcha foods like nash, etc. Meiser money. Can one use meiser money for mishloach manas? So, because of the Manais Levi's attribution of mishloach manas to love and friendship, it's common to have every single night before Purim, every family establishes a long list of different people they want to show appreciation to and give mishloach manas to. And sometimes the list gets quite expensive. And the question is asked, can they use meiser money? So certainly if the person receiving the mishloach manas is not a pauper, how on earth can you use meiser money to give presents to rich people? That's a very strange form of tzedakah. I'm giving rich people money. So obviously that doesn't come into question at all, to give it to rich people. What about people on this list are considered paupers? As we'll see in the laws of Matanas Lavyanim, anyone who does not have enough money to pay basic expenses and bills, which includes kids' tuition, is included in the term pauper, which there are many. According to some poskim, someone who doesn't have enough money to purchase a home, and he wants to, and he's trying to, he's also called an ani, a pauper. So we have a lot of people that could enter into the definition of an ani, a pauper, in this regard. So to those people, I could give meiser money to. If I could give meiser money to them, the question is asked, can I take off mishloach manas? Can I go through my list and see who can I consider to be considered an ani that I can just deduct the mishloach manas from meiser? The answer is like this. The rule by meiser is that meiser is it's funds that you have separated to give out for charitable purposes that you're not obligated in outside of the meiser obligation. But if I have, regardless of the meiser obligations, an independent obligation to do this, then I cannot use my meiser money to fund that. For example, I need to buy tefillin, to put on tefillin every day. I cannot use my meiser money to buy myself tefillin because I'm legally obligated to buy myself tefillin regardless of meiser. Mishloach manas, I'm legally obligated to give mishloach manas on Purim, so I cannot use meiser money to pay for that obligation. However, that's only by the minimal amount, which is 2 presents to 1 person. However, anything in addition to that on your list, then min hadin, it is permitted for one to deduct it from meiser if the recipients are considered a pauper. You get a phone call from someone who's in a city where there are no Jews, or he's traveling, there's no Yidden. He calls you up and he asks, can you please send someone mishloach manas on my behalf on Purim? Can you fulfill the mitzvah in such a way? The answer is absolutely yes. It's not a problem. It's done all the time. A lot of people call, there are companies that deliver mishloach manas. They're quite expensive. Pay a lot, and you don't get a lot, but nonetheless, it is a valid method of fulfilling mishloach manas, but this is only done if it's done with a person's knowledge. But if I'm giving it on someone's behalf who doesn't even know I'm giving it for him, then he would not fulfill his obligation because he was not aware. When is the mishloach manas to be sent? So as all the mitzvahs of Purim, the mitzvahs must be fulfilled specifically during daytime. They are not fulfilled, one is not yetze by fulfilling them at night. They are fulfilled during the day, and therefore, even though, because of the long list of mishloach manas, we may choose to send a little before Purim, on the night of Purim, the night after Purim, the day after Purim, the mitzvah is only fulfilled during the day of Purim from sunrise to sunset. That's when the mitzvah is fulfilled. So the best time, the most opportune time during the day to send Mishloach Manos is specifically after davening. And the reason for this is because of the Shechianu. The Shechianu, we have in mind all the mitzvahs of the day, which include Sudas Purim and Mishloach Manos. So in order for the Shechianu to count, so it's written that it's best to wait until after Shachris and then give the Mishloach Manos, so then your mitzvah includes the Shechianu. If you give it before and you're ready to fulfill the mitzvah. Regarding whether you should do what you should do first, Shlach Manos Matanos Avyenim, this matter is disputed amongst the Paiskim. There is no set arbitration in this. The Rabbi's custom was to give Shlach Manos right after davening Shachris. The Rabbi would distribute it a few minutes after Shachris and fulfill the mitzvah in that form. How many people? So as we know, by Mishloach Manos, it is one Mishloach. It is to one individual. We don't have to send to more than one person in Hadin. However, nonetheless, those who send to more than one, the wording in the Shulchan Aruch is, the Mechaber chapter 695, halacha 4, Harei Zeh Meshubach, he is praised for doing so. Why do the Chachamim say by Mishloach Manos only one person, one recipient is enough? While by Matanas Avyenim we need two, for the simple reason that Matanas Avyenim is more needed by the recipients than Mishloach Manos. Mishloach Manos can be given even to wealthy people, and wealthy people don't need these presents as much as the presence of Matanas Avyenim. So therefore, when they chose which mitzvah to add more people in the recipient list, they chose it should be Matanas Avyenim to give to paupers. The custom of the Rebbe was to, as well as the Rebbe Rayatz, to give 3 Mishloach Manos on Purim day, 1 to a Kohen, 1 to a Levi, and 1 to a Yisrael. However, as is recorded in Sefer HaMenhagim, this custom is not a directive to the public. It is not a public directive that everyone should follow. This was a personal custom of the Rebbe, of the Beis Harav, of the Rebbeim, and there is no need for us to copycat it. Who did the Rebbe give to? So the Rebbe sent to Rabbi Yaakov, who went, who was a Kohen. Shmuel Levitin was a Levi, before his passing. After Shmuel Levitin's passing, I believe it was Lamed Gimel, he would give to Shmuel David Reichik. And the Yisrael was Rav Chodakov. Who was after Rav Chodakov? I don't know.
Who was the Kohen?
Rabbi Yaakov went. What did the Rebbe send? The Rebbe would send a cake and a bottle of mashke or wine, sometimes Benedictine. This was basically the custom of Beis Harav, that starting from the Tzemach Tzedek, we have recorded that they would send a bottle of wine or something of the like, or other alcoholic beverage, and a cake. Okay, so we know that here in Eretz Yisrael we have 14-day celebrations and 15-day celebrations. And we have a number of cities which are under doubt, and we have Jerusalem, which of course celebrates on Tesvav.
14-day celebrations?
No, I mean 14th day. 14th day. And 15th day of Adar. So what we have to be aware for the laws of Mishloach Manos in this is that if we're sending Mishloach Manos to someone in Jerusalem, or someone in Jerusalem sending Mishloach Manos to us, it is a problem because according to some Paiskim, both the sender and receiver must be chayiv in Purim on that same day. So basically, bottom line is that one should not rely on Mishloach Manos being sent to Jerusalem or from Jerusalem to outside on their respective days of Purim, because we don't celebrate on the same day.
So as your mitzvah, you don't want to do that.
as the mitzvah, you don't want to rely on it, but of course you could. In addition, it can be part of the harezim meshubach. That's not a problem because you don't need to rely on it for the actual fulfillment of the mitzvah. But let's say there is let's say in the army base, you're doing with time, and you gave someone mishloach manis, and you say, here, why don't you give to me so you can fulfill your mitzvah. Now, if I'm a Jerusalemite and he is a Yudaladnik, he doesn't fulfill his mitzvah, because I don't celebrate Purim today. Today is not Purim for me. So these are cases you have to be careful that it should always be from the person celebrating on that day, should give on that to another person of that day. In Yerushalayim on the 15th, it's flooded with 14thers. People from all over come, and so you don't know who's who. So it's a good thing to find out. If you're only giving to one person, that's fulfilling your mitzvah, to give to only someone who's chayav on that day. Regarding sending to a mourner, so often we have one of the spouses is in mourning, so there's no problem in sending the mishloach manos to the family unit without naming specifically the avel. But if it's understood that the reason why you're sending the mishloach manos is because of the friendship with the avel, you don't know anyone else in the family, it's not a family friendship, then it would still be a problem because it's just a setup. But otherwise, if there is family connection, then you can just send to the entire family as a whole, even if the husband or wife, Rachmana litzlan, is in Avelus. So what is one to send? What should be the Mishloach Manos menu? So what the wording in the Rambam is to send 2 gifts of meat or other food to one person. He writes meat. So one thing clearly we see is that meat is valid to be sent. But he also, notice how he does not write that they have to be 2 different blessings. This idea that people have that the Mishloach Manos is to contain 2 different brachas is complete nonsense. It's incorrect. There is no such source, and there's no logic behind why the laws of brachas and what brach you make on a food would have any relevance to the validity of Mishloach Manos. As long as I gave 2 gifts of food, it is kosher. So definitely that is not accurate. However, the question is asked, can I send 2 of the same things? Can I send 2 cakes, the same exact cake? So some learn from the fact that Rambam here writes, which is the wording recorded in the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 695, 2 gifts of meat that I can send, 2 of the same thing. But some learn, no, this is referring to 2 different cuts of meat, or fowl and beef. Practically, the best thing is regarding this to be stringent to send 2 different types of gifts, not to send the same exact gift twice. But as we said before, definitely does not have to be 2 different blessings. We know that the Trumas Hadeshin records that he would send alcohol, beer, together with meat, which are both shahakol. Even though the original wording of the menu is to send meat and other foods, today the widespread custom is brought in the Knesset Agdoila, is to send sweets. So this custom we have today of buying nash, sweets, chocolate, and all these things, it's already an old custom of hundreds of years, even though originally people would send meal food. People would send tuna fish, people would send cuts of meat, potato salad, you name it. Let's not forget that according to Trumas Hadeshin, its main purpose is to be part of the Purim Seudah, and sweets don't accomplish that as much. Drinks, as I mentioned earlier, is a valid one of the 2 gifts. In fact, many poskim argue you can even send 2 drinks if you want, or a drink with a food. And practically, lemaisa, it's mutter to send 2 drinks, but the best thing is to send a drink and a food, or 2 foods. But there is no problem in having a drink count as one of the 2, so long as it is a chash of a drink. If I take a water bottle and fill it with tap water, then that's not a chash of matana to fulfill one's obligation. But if you buy very expensive mineral water, then why should that not be considered a matana? If you buy a bottle of Pepsi, Sprite, all that is considered clearly a matana, and one is yetze with it. We're almost done for today. Okay, so on the limitations on the menu, non-food items do not count. Someone who sends money or clothing, it's invalid for Mishloach Manis. It has to be something that is ready to eat. And based on that, it's also ruled that if the food is raw or needs any further preparation, it's also not valid. It has to be ready to be eaten, pre-cooked, etc., in order for it to be valid for the mitzvah.
A tea bag?
Teas, that's an interesting question. Based on this, it would seem that it's not good. On the other hand, you can also make tea cold, with cold water, and then it's like an added spice. Okay, it's definitely a nice idea to send tea boxes, but to avoid the raw issue, you can send something in addition. Okay, Rich, and we'll continue this next week. Finish off on this.